Let's talk about local governments and higher education next on Behind the Headlines.
This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, welcome to a new edition of Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenewald, Senior Fellow for the Susquehanna Valley Center of Public Policy, and I'm joined, as usual, by my co-host and associate, Maura Donnelly. Maura, welcome.
Hello, Charlie.
Hi. Why, and the news. We've been looking at news items as this presidential election comes closer in Pennsylvania. And now we've learned that not only in the last 3.5 years have all the different families lost 40% of their total wealth, but we find that now the average American family is $40,000 poorer than the average Canadian family. For the first time ever. Wow. What did you think of that?
Well, there's reason to go north.
Yes, I'm thinking of buying a few more loonies and toonies. The Canadian dollars. I used to go to Canada and I'd give them $1 and give back $1.46, and now we're just at parity. Quite a few changes. Wow. So someone to talk about these changes in economics and community development in Pennsylvania is, of course, the Secretary of the Department of Community and Economic Development, and we're lucky enough to have him with us today. Alan Walker, welcome to the show.
Good to be here.
Thanks very much. It's been a few years since we had you on the show last. We had you on the show when you were heading up some educational initiatives.
Right. I was back in the private sector at that time.
To help improve the state workforce, and we thank you for your work on that. We want to start out with being the senior member of the Corbett administration. If you could talk a little bit about what the progress of the Corbett administration has been done in improving the business climate in the Commonwealth.
Well, improving the business climate is very important to the governor, and I think he's really stayed on that track. Of course, by constitutional law, we have to have a balanced budget, but we inherited a $4.5 billion deficit last year. We were able to deal with that and get that under control. But we now have 2 years where we've seen the Governor Corbett's budget without a tax increase, and I think the budget that has passed this year is helps with job creation, which is what he's all about, because he knows if we're going to raise the standard of living in the state of Pennsylvania for our citizens, it's about job creation.
Are there any specific proposals in the budget that will help with that?
Well, I would say the manufacturing tax credit to me is going to be a huge help, and that came in because of the possibility of this Shell cracker in Beaver County. It's a 5-cent a gallon credit that will be given if the gas is used in the manufacturing process in the state of Pennsylvania. And our goal with that was to try to stop this wonderful resource we have, the natural gas, from being exported from the state of Pennsylvania. And we're trying to figure out how do we use it in the state of Pennsylvania to develop new industry and new jobs. I think what a lot of people don't understand is natural gas is a basis for the petrochemical industry. It's also the base for the plastics industry. And what we're trying to do is use that natural gas asset to grow the plastics industry in the state of Pennsylvania.
Well, let's talk about this cracker plant in Beaver County. It's huge headlines.
Yes, very exciting.
And the headlines read, "Shell picks Beaver County." So I read that and I think, oh, this is wonderful. We've been selected, but there's still a process going on here. It's not a done deal. Can you tell us a little bit about what the competition's like and what we can expect going forward, and what we still have to do as a Commonwealth to make that happen?
Well, certainly in round one, the site in Beaver County came out #1 for Shell, but we still have competition from Ohio and West Virginia. Excuse me, and you're correct. The deal has not yet been signed. The ink is not there. If all goes well, and we do all that we say we're going to do, and Shell says everything that they're going to do, and then the people who own the property now do everything they're supposed to do, we should be getting a cracker in western Pennsylvania. But I'm not going to celebrate until the document is signed.
You're not popping that champagne just yet?
Not yet,
no.
Not yet, but it will be cause to celebrate.
Now, what other steps does the Commonwealth need to take in order to to make us more attractive? Is there anything else
I think
we need to do?
we have done everything we committed
Okay.
to do. It'll be a KOZ, which will give them some tax.
And a KOZ is what?
Keystone
Keystone
Opportunity
Opportunity
Zone,
Zone.
which will give them a local a break from local property taxes. We gave the manufacturing tax credit, which will give them a credit for using Pennsylvania gas in the refinery process. We have helped with studying the property to see what kind of problems are there. A Phase 1 environmental study. I think they're doing the Phase 2 study now. Up to this point in time, everything looks good. And people wonder, well, why that particular location? They told us when they came in they had to be on a major river and preferably the Ohio River, because the equipment they're bringing in is so large it can't be moved by rail or by truck, so it has to be floated up from the Gulf of Mexico. And I think they're good as far as Pittsburgh, so it had to be somewhere between Pittsburgh and the Ohio line if it were going to be in the state of Pennsylvania, and that sort of took it right into the heart of Beaver County.
Oh, I actually spent a significant amount of time in Beaver County. My
Well, I know
family
you're a
was
Western
from there.
Pennsylvania
Yeah,
girl.
Beaver County was, and they were Monaca is what it's closest to, is one
Right.
of our biggest football rivalries. So.
Right.
So those were my stomping grounds for a long time. So it's nice to see, because that area has had some difficulties over the years.
Well, as you know, because you're from the western part of the state, that was really the center of the steel industry.
It was, yeah.
And when the steel industry went down, the statistic is incredible. One time, the state of Pennsylvania produced 25% of the steel that was produced in the world. Today, it's less than 1%. And where the jobs were really hit were in western Pennsylvania.
Right.
Allegheny County, Beaver County, Westmoreland County, the whole way up the line there. Those were our big steel producing counties, and lost a couple 100,000 jobs in that region, and really they haven't totally recovered yet. This will help.
Everyone I knew had a family member working in the steel industry when I was growing up.
It was huge. Yeah.
Well, what, as the new secretary, relatively new, you're on board now for 2 years, as the secretary of the Department of Community and Economic Development, what are some of the other things some of the other initiatives you've taken within that department to make make Pennsylvania more economically competitive?
Well, September 2011, we received information that the 3 oil refineries on the Delaware River in Pennsylvania would be closing down by July of 2012.
Yes.
That was not good news, because again, you factor in the multiplier effect. It could have been as many as 20,000 jobs lost between Philadelphia County and Delaware County, and those are great paying jobs too. So we immediately focused on that. So we were getting good news in the western part of the state on the cracker. We were getting bad news in the eastern part of the state with the refineries going down. We probably would have lost as many jobs in the east as we were gaining in the west. So right away we focused on how do we save those refineries. And I'm happy to report that as of today, it looks as if all 3 refineries will be saved. They'll be repurposed. And in all likelihood, when it all plays out, and the new investment is made, there'll be more jobs there moving forward than there were whenever they were announcing they were shutting down. So that's really a good news story for our department, for the governor, and for the state of Pennsylvania.
Oh, that is awesome.
Yeah, we've actually had people from that area, Maura, contact us by email and by phone asking what can be done about those refineries. There was a lot of concern and alarm over that. And, of course, Delta, I guess, came in.
Delta Airlines is going to buy the ConocoPhillips refinery trainer, and they are going to repurpose it, and they're going to make jet fuel there. And by making jet fuel, they are going to save $300 million a year in their internal costs for jet fuel. That's pretty substantial for an airline.
It is.
Another reason it was so important to us is because those refineries made what is known as middle distillate, which is number 2 home heating oil. They made 40% of the supply of home heating oil for the Middle Atlantic and New England states. Had we lost those 3 refineries and had a severe winter, we would have had to bring all that product up from the Gulf of Mexico, and it would have been a huge supply chain nightmare. So the fact that those 3 refineries are going to be saved really eases that problem as a concern moving forward too. So it's a win-win for everybody.
Oh my gosh, that does sound awesome.
Well, Delta bought one. Who bought the other?
Well, the Carlyle Group is going to partner with Sunoco, and they are going to make a major investment in the one Sunoco refinery, up the capacity, change the mix a little bit. So they will be the operating partner. Sunoco will stay on as an investor. but they needed the money to really upgrade the facility. The third is going to, at Marcus Hook, will be sort of divided up into different projects. One is Brass Chem, which is a subsidiary of Petrobras that makes chemicals there. When that refinery announced it was closing down, they were afraid they were going to lose their feedstock, so they said, if we can't save the portion that we need, then we're going to be moving to the Gulf, Houston. They had their corporate headquarters for the U.S. in Philadelphia, so not only would we have lost the jobs at the refinery, we would have lost the corporate headquarters jobs. But we were able to put a deal together. They carved out 150 acres, so they are going to continue to make their product there. They will keep their corporate headquarters in Philadelphia, so that also is a good news story. And then there's going to be a couple of announcements coming up here within the next couple of weeks about what's going to be done with other pieces of the refinery, but it's very creative, and it's again a win-win for everybody, considering what it was a year ago.
Significant victories for Pennsylvania.
It is because those are major employers. It's in the industrial sector. They're good-paying jobs. But we've had a series of victories across the state. It's not just those two regions. Chambersburg, which is Franklin County, has done extremely well. They're getting some Volvo facilities there, and tremendous warehousing. Distribution centers being built there. The railroad is building an intermodal transportation center out there. As you move east, Carlisle and that area is going to do well. I think York County is going to do well. The southern tier counties, the whole way across the state, and then the counties that border on the Delaware River, New Jersey, which would be Lehigh, Northampton, the Allentown, Bethlehem area is going to do very well. I go up there pretty regularly for a ribbon cutting for a new plant that's going to be built there. One specifically is that Ocean Spray Cranberry Juice is moving their packaging operation from Bordentown, New Jersey to the Macungie Township, which is near Allentown. It'll be several hundred jobs, but it's a huge investment. The plant will be $110 million, but that also brings the bottling with it and everything that goes with it. They like the area because of the logistics, because
the proximity.
you have the interstate highway system there, but also, believe it or not, they like Pennsylvania because it has better business taxes than New Jersey.
We don't hear that very often.
We do not hear that very often, but it's true. And the other thing you have to look at is property taxes. When you factor everything in, we all know, I think those who pay attention to it anyway, know that property taxes in Pennsylvania are much lower than property taxes in New Jersey. So because of the proximity to the East Coast, the Delaware River, I think, is now becoming a dividing line, and a lot of companies are looking at the counties along the Delaware River in Pennsylvania because it's just a much more favorable business climate.
Well, as a businessman from the private sector, as a past chairman of the board of the Pennsylvania Chamber, you've fought hard over the years for changes in business taxes.
I have.
Are we going to see some more proposals out of the governor on reducing?
Well, as you know, with this budget, capital stock and franchise tax was reduced again this year. It will be phased out by 2014.
Are you sure of that?
You can go to the bank with that.
Okay.
I will be shocked if that doesn't happen because as
it was a 10-year plan, but it took a little bit longer than
it did.
Years.
But as we try to market Pennsylvania, the fact that we have two business taxes really puts us at a disadvantage. So we have to phase out the one. We did go to the single sales factor, which I think is a major victory for business.
Yeah.
I know most people don't understand what that is, but for
it's
big corporations who do business in a lot of states, it's a good break for them because they were paying taxes on business that they weren't doing in the state of Pennsylvania. Now that won't happen. And I think ultimately the governor feels that if we can get our economy back on track, that he also wants to lower the corporate net income tax because we have the highest corporate net income tax in the country, and we've got to get that rate down.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, as being Secretary of the Department of Community and Economic Development and being former businessman in the coal industry, we see lots of ominous trends on the horizon that are being promoted by the Obama administration in regard to coal. Will the coal industry be able to survive in Pennsylvania when one looks at some of the things that are coming out of Washington?
Well, some of the large power plants have already made a huge capital investment to comply with the new clean air regulations that are coming along. But there's no doubt EPA is targeting the coal industry. They don't particularly like the coal industry for whatever reasons. I'm afraid a little bit of it is too political for me. But moving forward in this country, we have to use our energy resources to our advantage. And that means all energy. It means we have to have nuclear, we have to have coal, we have to have natural gas, we have to have hydro. And that's the one area we've really been able to compete against the rest of the world. It gives us a tremendous advantage against Europe. It gives us a tremendous advantage against China. It gives us a huge advantage against India. If we don't use it to our advantage, then there's something wrong with us. We have to use our energy to compete. And even, let's see, the first energy embargo was in 1974. We still don't have a national energy policy. I think one of the things you are going to see is that the state will have a state energy policy and a state energy plan, which will really help the state of Pennsylvania to compete moving forward. Because again, energy is a resource the state of Pennsylvania has that a lot of other states in the Middle Atlantic and New England region don't have. So I mean, we're going to use that to our advantage. Great statistic is in 2011, the state of Pennsylvania became a net exporter of natural gas.
Wow. Yes. Okay. Well, Secretary, Laura and I wish to thank you for joining us and all our viewers. We look to have you back in the future and check in on continued progress, and we wish you well. And we'll be back with another segment of Behind the Headlines right after this.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Pennsylvania Business Council, envisioning a commonwealth in which residents enjoy a very high quality of life in sustainable communities. The Council works aggressively to define key long-term policy strategies and solutions that make the Commonwealth more competitive, creating and sustaining a better Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, helping hospitals to provide healing, health, and hope to communities across the state. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by Daily Underwriters of America, a better way for truck insurance. And by Penn Waste, your best local choice for your waste removal and recycling needs.
Penn Waste is proud to be a locally owned business. Since the company's founding in 2000, it has employed many of its neighbors as members of a dedicated team of professionals. Penn Waste is proud of its many contributions to the people of its service area through support of numerous community organizations such as Christmas Addicts and the Junior League of York. One more way they improve the quality of life where they live and work.
Hi, welcome back to Behind the Headlines. And on the second segment, Maura and I are going to be talking to the president of the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculty, APSCUF, Steve Hicks. Steve,
Hi.
welcome back.
Nice to meet you.
It's nice to have you on the show.
Seems like I was
well.
just here.
We're very fortunate to have you back, and we want to talk about all the attention that higher education has been receiving in the Commonwealth. And of course, one of the forums, and we had you on to talk about that some time ago, but I believe that was last year. The administration has created the Governor's Post-Secondary Education Commission, and something that we pointed out at that point is you're not a member of that, nor is there a faculty representative on that commission. How many individuals are on the commission?
There are 30 on the commission.
30, but there isn't any faculty representation.
There are no public education faculties. There's one from a private institution.
Okay, all right.
And aren't we expecting a report out of them soon?
The governor laid out a report that's due the week after the election in November.
Okay.
This was laid out in his February budget speech. So they've been working since some point in February. Announced that day the membership on the commission. So they've been in action almost 6 months. They've met as a group here in Harrisburg a couple times just to talk, and they got a couple presentations that were laid out for them, I think, by the Department of Education. And then they went around the state for hearings. They had one here, one in Philly, one in Pittsburgh, one someplace north of Pittsburgh, and one in Wilkes-Barre. So they've been around and tried to get feedback from people, and they've had very interesting discussions about a whole series of issues having to do with higher education. So.
Well, it sounds like you have a pretty good in on what's going on. Any rumors on?
Well,
what's
I've been to a number of their meetings,
okay.
and of course I have staff at them all who brief me afterwards, so I hear all the good quips. Yes.
Oh, good.
So yeah.
Okay.
Well, one of the items, of course, that's being discussed and examined over the last few years is the role of distance education in higher education. Steve, you know that better than anyone. Something that occurred recently that I had a little bit of interest in is, as a graduate of the University of Virginia, we find that the board, or the board chairman at the University of Virginia, tried to fire the president of the University of Virginia without an official vote of the board. And apparently one of the issues that was being examined or was being fought over was distance education. How does distance education fit in to higher education?
Well, yeah, and by the way, the UVA connection explains the tie, right, Charlie?
Yes, thank you for noticing. Yes, and actually, we find that all the deans and the rest of the faculty rose up and said, we want to keep this president, and the president was reinstated. Yeah,
it was very, very interesting news in higher education, and I think there's a nexus here between the commission's work and the UVA situation.
The Governor's Commission.
Yeah, okay. The Governor's Commission and the UVA situation, in that they both have brought to the forefront the question of use of distance ed, how effective it is, and who should be in the distance ed business. As an organization, we're very much proponents of distance ed. I mean, we understand that distance education is the wave of the future. I mean, we're going to do this, and in a economic position where there's less money for bricks and mortar, clearly the opportunity to spread education around the Commonwealth through distance learning is something we can't ignore. However, the problem is that people act like it's cheaper to do distance education, and it's not necessarily cheaper.
Well, you have to have the right technology in place.
Right, and that's the thing. You have to have the right infrastructure in place. You have to have people who do it and understand these things say you have to have a high speed fiber optic. You can't do dial-up and do distance asynchronic distance education or synchronic distance education. And that's an expense that nobody gets into. People think that we can bring lower income people in with this, and they need a fast computer, they need a fast internet connection, somebody's got to pay for it, and that's a problem. On the university end, they've got to pay IT people. You've got to keep all this working, and because Charlie and I both understand as college professors, you stand there with a piece of chalk, not much is going to go wrong. But if your your optic cable goes down in the middle of class, you lose a class, and so you can lose education that way. The other piece of it is they have to pay a lot of money for the software. I mean, the state system spent $10 million 2 years ago for a software package whose acronym is D2L. That runs all this and is their system of choice. So that's millions of dollars you have invested that helps. Everybody says, oh, it's cheaper because you don't have a building, blah blah blah. But there are all these other infrastructure costs that make it not as productive, if you would, which is what everybody's searching for. That's one of the things the Governor's Commission has been charged with affordability and accessibility, and looking into that and doing the best they can for people in the Commonwealth and make sure that students coming into the Commonwealth schools are getting the bang for their buck. And they want to look at something like distance education to make sure that they can do so. So far, the Commission has been, they've heard lots of conflicting statements about how all this works, and it's kind of hard to see how the Commission's going to pull it all together. But to go back to the UVA issue, the President wanted to do distance education. She never said no, and she had a plan, but it wasn't a one-year plan. It was a 5-10-year long-term plan to work all this in and do it right, and the board chair wanted it done now, because they looked at possible profits, and particularly they like the numbers that for-profit institutions that are mostly online show, and they want to capture some of that. And so
well, again,
it
we've
gets
talked
you into a
about
great-
this with you in the past, the whole idea of a business model for higher education.
Right.
Higher education institutions, just I've never believed that they're for generating profits.
Right.
They're to secure and pass on civilization, and they're to educate our young men and women and to prepare them for careers. Never knew that it was about making any kind of a profit, Steve.
Well, you know, life's changed since we were young men, hasn't it? Yes. But in terms of distance education, I think one of the issues is that very one of educating people. It can do positive things in terms of education, but there are certain subject matters and courses that you just can't do it in, or you shouldn't do it in, because it doesn't work as effectively. And all the research shows that you have to pick the right course, you have to have the right person, you have to have the right sort of support system in place. If all those things aren't right, you know, you might as well not have the class, because you're not going to get the outcome you want and the education you want. And that's why I think Charlie and I are pretty old school, and you know, it's tried and true to put somebody in front of a classroom full of people and you communicate, you can see what they're going to do. And that model has worked for something like 3 millennium now, and it still works very effectively. And I think all the outcomes research indicates that it's still the best way to teach people. It may not be the least expensive way sometimes, but it is the best way to educate people.
Okay, we have less than a minute left. We love doing this to you.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the Governor's Higher Education Modernization Act and the development of intellectual property in universities.
The governor signed the act the week after the budget passed. It is the biggest piece of legislation having to do with the state system since it incorporated in 1983. Probably the biggest thing we think we're going to see is it enables university presidents to raise money for the foundations legally, which was a problem. I think there's an intellectual property piece that gives our faculty an opportunity, but we're not research institutions, so we don't foresee a huge boom in that. But
Does it have to do with tech transfer, making it easier to transfer it out into commercialization?
Exactly, yeah. And the biggest example is cell phone apps these days. It seems to be the place where there's money and people come up with creative ideas.
Sometimes there's money.
It's like every other creative endeavor. It's not automatic. Right.
Well, thank you again, Steve, for checking in with us, giving us an update. And we know you have to get back to negotiations, so...
I know you're worried, Charlie.
We know you have to get back to negotiations, and we'll be following that, and hope to see you again in the not-too-distant future.
All right,
okay.
Thank you.
We'll be back with a new program next week on Behind the Headlines. We'll see you then, and we'll see you on YouTube and on voiceofpa.net, where you can see all our shows archived. We'll see you then.